There is nowhere you need to be right now. There is nothing waiting for you. No list, no message, no obligation that cannot rest until morning. Whatever the day held, it is already behind you, already settling like sediment in still water, drifting softly down to somewhere unreachable. You have arrived at the end of it, and the end of it is gentle, so let yourself settle now. Feel the surface beneath you, the particular weight of where you are, and let your body acknowledge it. Let your shoulders drop a little, let your jaw unclench if it has been holding something. Let your hands open just slightly, the way hands do when they finally have nothing left to carry. There is no effort required from you tonight, not even the effort of staying awake, especially not that. In a few moments you will step into a world that moves at the pace of drifting fog. It is a world of quiet water and soft lantern light, of ink and cardamom and the slow, patient work of recording beautiful things. Nothing in this world hurries. No one in this world is waiting for you to be faster or sharper or more prepared than you already are. You are exactly who you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do, which is simply to be present and then, in time, to let even that go. Breathe in slowly and out. Let the breath be easy. Let it come and go without management, without control. Just the body doing what it has always known how to do, breathing in the dark, finding its own quiet rhythm. You are already almost there. Let the world around you soften at its edges and come aboard. The first thing you notice is the air. It arrives before anything else, before the light, before the sounds, before the slow rocking sensation that tells you where you are. The air is cool and carries salt, but not the sharp salt of open ocean storms. This salt is older, softer, more like a memory of salt than salt itself, the kind that settles in the wood of ships that have been at sea for a very long time, absorbed into the grain of every beam and plank until the wood itself seems to breathe with it. And beneath that salt, something else, something mineral and dark and faintly sweet, the way a glass jar of ink smells when you open it in a quiet room, deep and still and somehow full of possibility. That is the indigo. It is always present here, on the stern gallery of the Solemn Meridian, where the logbooks live and the drawing styluses rest in their cedar-lined case, and the work of careful observation has been going on for longer than anyone aboard can precisely remember. You are sitting in the cartographer's chair, a low, wide seat of worn oak with a cushion of dark wool, positioned at the very back of the ship where the gallery opens out over the water. Before you is the chart table, a broad expanse of pale wood worn smooth by decades of maps and measurements and the slow turning of pages. The table is bolted gently to the deck with brass fittings that have gone the color of old honey, and at its near edge, closest to you, the logbook lies open. It is a substantial thing, thick cream-colored pages, a cover of dark green cloth overboard, its brass corner fittings cool and smooth where your fingers rest against them. The pages are already marked with the entries from the early evening, small columns of numbers, the air temperature at the start of the watch, a few careful lines noting the quality of the light as the sun went down somewhere far astern, too far to see directly, visible only as a long amber stain across the western horizon that has since faded entirely. Now the horizon is dark, or not quite dark. The sky holds the deep blue of a night that has not yet committed to full darkness, a blue like the bottom of a very clear pool, and in it there are stars, though they are soft and scattered here, not the brilliant sharp stars of open ocean, but something gentler, slightly diffused by the fine mist that is beginning to gather at the level of the water. The mist is not yet fog. It has not yet thickened enough to earn that name, but it is moving slowly across the surface of the sea in long, low ribbons, and where the lanterns aboard the ship catch it, it turns the color of warm amber, a soft glow that seems to emanate from the air itself rather than from any single source. The lanterns are hung along the gallery railing, small brass-fitted oil lamps with thick glass panels that have been aboard long enough to develop a faint amber tint of their own, so that the light they cast is doubly warm, warm from the flame and warm from the glass, and it falls across the chart table and the open logbook in a way that makes everything look ancient and significant and peaceful. You can see the light moving slightly as the ship moves, a gentle sway, barely perceptible, less like motion and more like breathing, the slow, deep breathing of a vessel that has been at sea for so long it has developed something like a rhythm of its own. And below you, below the gallery, below the hull, through the water itself, there is something extraordinary. The sea here is becoming transparent. It has not yet fully completed its long, gradual transformation, but it is well along the way. The water that the Solemn Meridian moves through tonight is not the opaque dark green or blue-black of deeper seas. It is clear, almost perfectly clear, with only the faintest tinge of color, a pale aquamarine, like old glass, like sea-polished stone, and through it, in the 30 feet between the hull and the sandy floor below, you can see everything. The sandy floor itself is pale, almost white, crossed here and there by long, slow ripples left by currents that have since gone quiet. There are rocks down there, smooth and rounded, arranged in formations that look almost deliberate. Long, low ridges, occasional clusters of larger stones around which the sand has been swept into perfect curves. And there is the kelp. The kelp is the reason the night watch is beautiful. It grows in slow forests across the sandy floor, and it is bioluminescent, not brightly, not dramatically, but with a deep and patient light, the way embers glow in a fire that has been burning for a long time and is in no hurry to go out. The colors shift between green and amber, between amber and green, in a rhythm that is almost, but not quite, regular. Long, slow pulses of faint green moving up the length of a frond, followed by a settling back into amber, followed by the green again. And occasionally, in the deeper clusters, a pulse that is almost gold, a warm and drowsy color, as if the kelp itself is half asleep and dreaming in slow light. You watch this for a long moment before you think to reach for the stylus. The stylus is a long, slender instrument, weighted slightly toward the lower end, with a nib of fine brass that holds the indigo ink and releases it in a thin, smooth line when drawn across the heavy paper. It rests in a groove cut into the right-hand edge of the chart table, a small channel worn smooth by years of styluses resting in it between entries, and when you lift it, it is cool and satisfying in your hand, balanced in a way that good instruments always are, neither heavy nor light, but exactly as present as it needs to be. You dip the nib into the small inkwell set into a brass ring at the table's corner, and you hear the faintest sound, the liquid surface of the ink releasing the nib as you draw it up, and then you bring it to the page. The scratching sound it makes is soft and steady and entirely pleasant. Not a harsh sound, not a scrape or a rasp, but a gentle, continuous whisper of brass on paper, the kind of sound that fills a small space without demanding anything from it. You write the time, you write the air temperature, which you have taken from the mercury column mounted beside the railing, a small glass tube and a brass bracket, the silver line of mercury sitting just above the mark that means cool but comfortable, the kind of temperature that makes a wool blanket feel like a kindness rather than a necessity. and then you begin to describe what you see below. You write, "The bioluminescence is present and active across the full visible floor." You write, "Primary colors green and amber, cycling in slow alternation." You write, "One area of the floor, perhaps 20 degrees to port, shows a larger formation of stones." And here you pause, and instead of words you begin to sketch, the stylus moving in slow, deliberate curves across the paper, tracing the shape of the rocks as you see them through the water, their smooth outlines, the way the sand has settled around them in long, graceful curves. The sketch takes several minutes. You are in no hurry. The ship drifts on at the pace of a drifting thought, and the rocks below drift slowly past your view, and you record what you can before they pass out of sight, and then you set the stylus back in its groove and watch the empty sand where the rocks were, which is beautiful in its own way, just pale sand and the slow green-amber breathing of the kelp. The smell of the ink is present throughout all of this. It is a smell that has attached itself to this gallery, to this table, to this watch, mineral and dark, with a slight sweetness that might be the cedar of the stylus case, or might simply be something intrinsic to indigo itself, something in the chemistry of the pigment that carries a faint warmth beneath its darkness. Mixed with the salt air and the cool of the approaching mist, it is a smell that feels like concentration, like the particular atmosphere of a place where careful attention is being paid, where the world is being noticed and written down, where things that might otherwise go unrecorded are given a moment of patient acknowledgement. You breathe it in without thinking about it, and you go on watching the sea below. After a while, it is difficult to say how long because time moves differently here, more like the kelp's slow pulse than like the ticking of a clock. You become aware of footsteps on the companionway stairs that lead below decks. They are unhurried footsteps, soft-souled, the kind that have learned not to disturb a quiet ship at night. They stop at the top of the stairs for a moment. You don't turn to look, but you are aware of a presence at the edge of the gallery, brief and easy, and then there is the small sound of something being set on the chart table, and the footsteps recede back down the stairs without a word, without requiring anything from you at all. You turn finally to look. On the corner of the chart table, just within reach, there is a tin. It is a small round tin, the kind with a fitted lid, its surface worn to a soft pewter color with a few flecks of an older paint that was once dark green. And from beneath the lid there rises a thread of steam, pale, slow, curling upward into the cool air of the gallery and then dispersing into nothing, carrying with it a smell that is warm and spiced and deeply familiar. Cardamom, and beneath the cardamom the dark roasted depth of good tea, and beneath that something sweet and faintly floral that might be the milk, or might be something added deliberately, a small kindness from whoever left it. You wrap both hands around the tin. The warmth moves through your palms immediately, through your fingers, up into your wrists, a gentle, thorough warmth, the kind that doesn't burn but simply fills, the way a warm room fills after a cold walk. You lift the lid and set it aside, and the steam rises more freely now, curling in the lantern light, and the smell of cardamom becomes the entire world for a moment, sweet and warm and slightly sharp, cutting gently through the salt and the ink and the cool of the gathering mist. You hold the tin close and breathe it in, and something in you, some last held tension from the day, some residual alertness that has been waiting to be released, lets go a little more. You take a slow sip. The tea is the right temperature, warm enough to feel like care, cool enough to drink without caution. It is sweet and spiced, and there is a depth to it, a slowness, the way cardamom always suggests slowness, the long, unhurried process of steeping, of waiting, of allowing heat and time to do their quiet work. You hold it in your mouth for a moment before swallowing, and then you set the tin on the edge of the table and return your gaze to the water below. The bioluminescence has shifted slightly in your absence, or rather, it is the same as it was, the same slow green and amber breathing, the same patient rhythm, but the area of the floor visible below has changed because the ship has drifted on, and what is below you now is a region where the kelp grows less densely, where there are long, open stretches of pale sand between the fronds, and in those stretches the pulses of light travel differently, not through the kelp itself, but across the sand, reflected and scattered, so that the whole floor seems to breathe together in a single slow exhalation of amber, and then a slow inhalation of green, and then amber again. And it is like watching something sleep, something enormous and unhurried and entirely at peace with the fact of its own stillness. You reach for the stylus. You write, the kelp density has decreased. You write, the bioluminescence is now more diffuse, spreading across the open sand in slow waves rather than concentrated in individual fronds. You write, the effect is, and here you pause, holding the stylus above the page for a moment, trying to find the right word. The effect is somnolent. You write that word carefully, each letter deliberate, and it looks right on the page. It looks like the thing it is describing, the long, slow curves of it, the way it settles into the cream-colored paper like something going to rest. The stylus makes its soft scratching sound. The ship creaks. It is a low sound, resonant and slow, not a creak of distress, but a creak of accommodation, the sound of wood that has spent decades learning to hold its shape against the pressure of water and movement and time. The hull settles into a slightly different position as the ship passes over a subtle change in the depth of the floor below, a slight deepening, the sand dropping away another foot or two, and the creak moves through the gallery like a slow wave of sound, from stern to bow, low and full and somehow comforting, the way the sound of a house settling at night is comforting because it means the house is still there, still present, still holding. The sound fades, and the silence that follows it is slightly more complete than the silence that came before. You take another sip of tea. The mist has thickened while you were writing. It is not yet fog. You can still see the stars, or most of them, though they are softer now, slightly blurred at their edges, but the ribbons of mist that were drifting low across the water have begun to rise, to layer themselves one over another, to accumulate into something more substantial. The lanterns at the gallery railing are beginning to do a thing they do when the moisture in the air reaches a certain point. The light they cast stops being directional and becomes diffuse, spreading outward in all directions equally, so that the space around the ship is filled with a soft, even glow rather than pools of brightness separated by shadow. Everything in the gallery is touched by this light. The chart table, the open logbook, the tin of tea, the brass fittings of the railing, all of it rendered in warm amber, all of it slightly softened, all of it looking like something that exists at the edge of a dream. You are aware of the weight of the wool blanket across your knees. It was there when you sat down, folded and waiting, a heavy blanket of dark wool, the kind that has been washed so many times it has gone from scratchy to simply dense, from rough to something that is almost soft in its thoroughness. At some point during the first hour of the watch, you had drawn it up across your lap without thinking about it, a reflex against the cool of the night air, and now it lies there like a quiet presence, warm where it touches your legs, slightly cool at its upper edge where the night air reaches it, a perfect boundary between the chill of outside and the warmth of your own body. You settle your hands into it now, the stylus resting again in its groove, and you simply sit for a moment in the light and the warmth, looking out at the water. The water below is extraordinary in the thickening mist, because the mist softens the ambient light from above but does not eliminate it, and because the bioluminescence below is a source of its own light. The effect is of looking down through a window into an illuminated room while standing in a dimly lit corridor. The below-water world seems to glow more brightly by contrast, the green and amber pulses more vivid against the pale sand, the shapes of the rocks and the kelp fronds more clearly defined, as if the fading of the world above has made the world below more present, more immediate, more willing to be seen. You watch a long pulse of green move through a cluster of kelp fronds perhaps 20 feet below. It travels from the base of the fronds upward, reaching the tips and then fading, and then the amber settles back in, slow and warm, and then the green again, and you think that you could watch this for hours, which is of course precisely what you are here to do. The second half hour arrives without announcement. You know it has come because the mercury column tells you. You reach over to the brass bracket beside the railing and lift the thermometer gently, holding it up to the lantern light to read the silver line. The temperature has dropped a degree, perhaps slightly more. The air is moving almost imperceptibly from cool toward cold, the kind of cold that arrives slowly and without drama on a ship at night when the sea is calm and the sky is clearing above the mist. You note the reading in the logbook, the stylus scratching softly against the paper, the numbers appearing in a neat column below the first, and then you replace the thermometer in its bracket. The small click of the brass fitting accepting the glass tube is a clean, precise sound, brief and complete, and then it is gone and the quiet resumes. You reach for the tea again. It has cooled somewhat, which is not unwelcome. It is now at the temperature of something that has been kept warm by attention rather than by heat, and it tastes slightly different at this temperature, the cardamom less sharp, the sweetness more present, the depth of the tea itself more apparent. You hold the tin in both hands again and feel the warmth, lesser now but still real, still moving through your palms, and you look out past the railing at the sea. The Solemn Meridian drifts on. There is, you notice, almost no sound from the water itself. Occasionally, rarely, briefly, there is the softest suggestion of a sound against the hull, something between a lap and a sigh, the barest touch of nearly still water against wood, so quiet that it is almost more felt than heard, a vibration in the hull rather than a sound in the air. But mostly the water is silent. This is one of the signs that you have been told to watch for, one of the indications that a region of sea is far along in its gradual fading. The water becomes quieter as it becomes clearer, as if the transparency and the stillness arrive together, as if the sea's sound is somehow tied to its opacity, to the darkness that hides what moves within it. Here, where the floor is visible 30 feet down and the kelp breathes its slow amber-green light, the water makes almost no sound at all. It is present, it carries the ship, it does everything that water needs to do, but it does it in near silence, with a patience that seems almost deliberate, almost chosen. You write this in the logbook. You write, "The water is very quiet, minimal hull sound. The sea in this region appears to have reached an advanced state of clarity and stillness." You write, "The floor is visible with exceptional definition, no distortion from wave action. The kelp formations below present as a detailed and continuous map of the floor's topography." And then you pause, and you add, slowly, with the stylus moving carefully, something that is perhaps not strictly a scientific observation, but that seems nevertheless necessary to record. It is very peaceful here. You look at that sentence on the page for a moment. It sits among the columns of temperatures and the careful notations of bioluminescent color and the small, precise sketches of rock formations, and it looks slightly different from the rest, a little less formal, a little more present, written in a slightly looser hand, as if the hand itself relaxed slightly in the writing of it. But it is accurate. It is the most accurate thing you have written in the logbook tonight. You leave it there. The fog is thickening now in earnest. It has risen from the level of the water to the level of the railing, and it is still rising slowly, the way fog always rises when the conditions are right, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, incrementally, so gradually that you notice it only in retrospect, only when you compare how far you can see now to how far you could see 10 minutes ago and find that the difference is significant. The stars are gone above the mist, or nearly gone. There is one, just one, that is still faintly visible through a thin place in the fog, a small soft point of light that seems less like a star and more like the memory of a star, the afterimage of brightness on a field of soft gray-white. And then that too fades. The world has contracted to the size of the gallery. Beyond the railing, there is only the fog, orange-amber where the lanterns touch it, fading to pale gray at its edges, and beyond that edge, nothing visible, just a soft and comfortable blankness, as if the rest of the world has been set aside for the night, folded up and put away, leaving only this small warm space of wood and brass and lamplight and the open logbook and the smell of ink and cardamom. And below, still visible through the clear water despite everything that has changed above, the slow amber-green breathing of the kelp. It is almost possible to believe that the kelp's light is the only light in the world. You sketch for a while without writing. The stylus moves across a fresh page in slow, exploratory curves, not the precise technical sketches of the earlier hours, but something more contemplative, more responsive to the mood of the watch. You are sketching the kelp formations as you imagine them from directly above, as if you were a bird hovering over the clear water and looking straight down, the long wavering lines of the fronds, the open spaces of sand between them, the occasional dark circle of a rock formation. It is not a map in any strict sense. It is more like a record of how something looks when you pay it close attention for a long time, when the looking itself becomes a kind of relationship with what is being looked at. The stylus scratches softly. The ink smells of minerals and the deep blue dark of something ancient. The ship drifts on. Below, a pulse of amber moves through the kelp, slow, full, reaching from one edge of the visible floor to the other before fading, and you pause your sketching to watch it pass. It takes a long time. Longer than you expected, as if the kelp has slowed its rhythm slightly in response to the fog, or in response to the hour, or simply because this is what kelp does in the deep part of the night when no one is watching. It breathes more slowly, it rests more deeply, it allows itself the luxury of an unhurried pulse. The amber fades, the green returns, but softer now, less vivid, more like a suggestion of green than green itself, the color of shallow water over pale sand in early morning light. And then that too fades, and there is a moment of almost darkness below the hull, just the pale sand and the still shapes of the kelp fronds before the amber comes again. You realize you have stopped sketching. The stylus is resting in your hand, its nib just above the paper, waiting. You have been watching the kelp instead of recording it, which is perhaps not exactly your task for the night, but which feels entirely appropriate, entirely in keeping with the spirit of the work, because surely the cartographer who never simply watches, who records everything and observes nothing, is missing something essential about the place they are meant to describe. You lower the stylus back to the page and add a few more lines to the sketch. A long, slow curve for a frond caught in the amber light, a small, tight spiral for a rock half buried in sand, and then you set the stylus in its groove and pick up the tin of tea. The tea is cool now. It is the temperature of something that has been sitting in a cool room for a comfortable amount of time, not cold, not warm, but at rest, at equilibrium with the air around it, which is itself at equilibrium with the fog and the night and the slow breathing of the nearly still sea. You drink the last of it. It is sweet and spiced and slightly cool and entirely satisfying, the last sip of a good thing that was always going to end and ended well. You set the tin aside, the lid still off, and the small remaining heat of it rises in one last thin thread of steam that the fog catches immediately and makes its own. You are warm. The blanket across your knees holds the warmth of your own body, the wool dense and patient, and your hands rest in it now, the brass corner of the logbook cool and smooth under the fingers of your left hand, the stylus held loosely in your right. The gallery is small and amber lit and fog surrounded and entirely quiet except for the soft sound of the ship, the low occasional creak of the hull settling, the barely audible movement of water against wood. There is nothing required of you right now except to sit in this warmth and this light and to be present to what is below. And what is below is very beautiful. In time, it might be the 3rd hour of the watch, or it might be later. The mercury column would tell you if you checked it, but you have not yet reached for it. The character of the bioluminescence below begins to change. It has been shifting gradually throughout the watch, so gradually that you have registered each small change without fully noting it, the way you register the incremental darkening of an evening sky without being able to say precisely when it became night. But now the change is more apparent. The green has been fading for some time, you realize, drawing back from the tips of the kelp fronds toward their bases, concentrating itself into smaller and smaller areas of the floor, leaving behind a broader and broader field of amber. And the amber itself has been deepening, warming, becoming less like a color and more like a quality of light, less like something the kelp is producing and more like something the kelp is becoming, as if the light and the plant have been negotiating all night and have arrived at last at a single shared warmth. The floor below glows amber gold. The kelp fronds are still, almost entirely still, their long leaves barely moving in whatever faint current remains in this nearly motionless water. And the pulses, when they come, are longer now and slower, not the quick alternation of green and amber that marked the early watch, but long, deep, full exhalations of warm light that take their time and fade only very gradually, leaving behind a dimness that is itself barely a step from the pulse's warmth. You write bioluminescence entering its late phase. You write green component nearly absent, amber dominant and deepening, pulse rhythm has slowed significantly. You pause, and then you write. The floor below resembles, in this late phase, a field seen in early autumn light, warm, low, patient. You consider that sentence. It is not a standard cartographic notation, but it is true, and you leave it. The fog is very thick now. It presses gently against the gallery on all sides, and the lanterns are haloed in it, each one surrounded by a soft sphere of amber light that overlaps with the spheres of the lanterns to either side, so that the entire gallery exists within a continuous warm glow that has no single source and no single direction. The fog has muffled what small sounds the night was making, the distant creak of rigging, the very faint sound of water, so that now there is almost nothing to hear except the occasional low settling of the hull and the soft scratch of the stylus when you write. Those two sounds together, the deep wooden creak, and the light papery scratch are the entire sound world of the gallery tonight. They are more than sufficient. You have filled many pages. Turning back through the logbook now, slowly, you can see the record of the watch spread across them, the early notations, formal and precise, the columns of temperature readings, the careful technical sketches of rock formations. Then the middle pages, where the entries become slightly longer, slightly more observational, where phrases like somnolent and the effect is of looking through glass begin to appear among the numbers. And then the later pages, where the entries are shorter again but differently short, not the brevity of efficiency, but the brevity of deep attention, of someone who has been looking at something for a long time and has arrived at the point where a single word can hold what a paragraph could not. Amber. Still. The kelp breathes. You close the logbook to its current page and rest your hand on the cover. The cloth is slightly warm from the lantern light. The brass corners are cool and smooth. You hold it for a moment, your hand flat on the cover, feeling the slight give of the thick pages inside, the solidity of the board beneath the cloth, the weight of all the accumulated observation, the patient record of a beautiful and fading place that someone thought worth the trouble of writing down. And you think, if thinking is quite the right word for what is happening in your mind, which has been growing quieter with each passing hour, each successive entry, each slow amber pulse below, you think that this is what the work is for. Not the charts exactly, not the temperature columns or the precise technical sketches, but this, the act of being present to something, of sitting with it through the long hours, of watching it closely enough to notice when the green begins to fade and the amber deepens and the pulses slow towards something that looks like rest. The record of having been here, the evidence of attention. You set the logbook aside and simply rest for a while. The blanket is warm across your knees. Your hands are folded in it, the stylus set back in its groove, the inkwell capped. You capped it at some point without particularly deciding to, the way you do small necessary things when a part of you has already begun to wind down for the night. The tin of tea sits empty and cool at the table's edge. The lanterns burn on, amber and steady, their light so thoroughly diffused by the fog that it seems less like light from a source and more like the natural luminosity of the air itself, as if fog at this hour simply glows a little, as if that is what fog is for. And below, always below, throughout all of this, patient and constant, the kelp breathes its amber light through the clear, still water. The ship makes a sound, a long, slow creak that begins deep in the hull and moves upward through the wood of the gallery floor, through the legs of the chair, through the table and its brass fittings, a sound that is less heard than felt, a vibration that passes through you and out the other side without leaving anything behind except a slight deepening of the quiet that follows it. The Solemn Meridian settling. The Solemn Meridian finding its ease in the nearly still water, in the fog-softened night, in the amber glow from below and above. You feel it in your hands, in the soles of your feet, in the base of your spine, a long, low note that the ship plays to itself in the dark, the sound of a thing that has been doing its work for a very long time and is entirely at peace with the doing of it. You breathe in. The air smells of salt and indigo and the last ghost of cardamom from the empty tin. It smells of fog, which has its own smell, clean and slightly damp and very neutral, the smell of air that has given up its temperature and its history and become simply present, simply itself, filling the space available to it with an equal and unhurried thoroughness. And beneath all of it, faintly, the smell of the wood of the ship, old and salt-saturated and warm from the lanterns, a smell that is the accumulated record of every sea this ship has crossed, every fog it has drifted through, every night watch that has been kept on this gallery by someone sitting in this chair with a logbook and a stylus and a tin of tea going gradually cool. You breathe out. There is no hurry here. There has never been any hurry here, on this ship, in this sea, in this watch. The Solemn Meridian moves at the pace of a drifting thought, and a drifting thought moves at the pace of the mind that is releasing it, slowly, gradually, without effort, without the need to hold on. And you are very much in the spirit of the ship tonight. You have done your work carefully and well. You have recorded what needed to be recorded. You have watched what needed to be watched. The logbook is full of the night's careful attention, and now the attention itself is beginning, very gently, to release. You notice the fog has come up over the railing now. It is inside the gallery, or rather, there is no longer a clear distinction between inside and outside, between the space the gallery defines and the fog that surrounds it. The fog has arrived slowly and without announcement, and the gallery has accepted it the way the ship accepts the sea, by simply continuing to be what it is, undisturbed, going on with its quiet business of being warm and lit and present. The fog moves in slow drifts across the chart table, across the open logbook, across your hands resting in the wool blanket. It is not cold. It is the same temperature as the air around it, which is the same temperature as the night, which is cool and comfortable and entirely appropriate to the hour. It softens everything it touches, not by changing it, but by making its edges less insistent, by allowing the shapes of things to be suggestions rather than definitions. The lanterns glow on. They are patient, these lanterns. And they have been burning all evening, and they will burn until someone comes to tend them, which will not be for some time yet, and they do not seem to mind. Their light in the fog is the most diffuse it has been all night. Not quite orange, not quite gold, something in between, something that exists in the warm middle ground between those two colors where the eye relaxes and the mind does not need to name what it sees. You sit in this light and you feel it on your face, gentle and indirect, the warmth of it barely perceptible against your skin, but present, always present, like a hand held near but not touching, like warmth remembered rather than felt. Below, the kelp. The kelp is very slow now. The pulses come at long intervals, long enough that between them the floor is nearly dark, just the pale sand and the still shapes of the fronds, waiting, and when the amber comes it fills the water slowly, like light filling a room when a curtain is drawn aside, gradual and complete and generous. It stays a long time, the amber. It stays as if it has no reason to leave, as if the kelp itself has decided that this particular pulse deserves to be extended, to be held, to be allowed its full duration before it fades back into the waiting dimness. And then it fades, slowly. The way a thought fades when you stop following it, when you allow it simply to go its own way and become something less distinct, less demanding, less in need of your attention. The amber thins to a faint warmth, and then to a memory of warmth, and then to the pale sand and the still kelp, waiting for the next pulse, patient as everything is patient here. Your eyes are heavy. This is not a problem. This is, in fact, the natural conclusion of a night watch conducted well. The slow accumulation of warmth and stillness and the hypnotic regularity of the kelp's breathing, the fog softening the world to a comfortable smallness, the logbook full of careful work, the tea finished, the stylus at rest. Your eyes are heavy and your hands are warm, and the wool blanket is dense and present across your knees, and the ship breathes its long, low creak, and the water makes its barely audible sound against the hull, and the amber pulses below come slower and slower and fuller and longer. You let your eyes close for a moment. The amber is still there when they close. Not as a sight exactly, as an impression, a warmth on the inside of the eyelids, the after-image of a color that has been present all night, that has worked its way into the fabric of the watch, that will be there when you open your eyes and will be there when you close them, and is simply, at this point, part of what it means to be here. The amber light of the kelp, seen through the clear water of a fading sea, on the stern gallery of the Solemn Meridian, on a foggy night in the middle of the unmapped quiet. A warm light, a slow light, a light that is entirely at peace with the dark that surrounds it. You open your eyes again, briefly. The logbook is still there, open to the last entry. The stylus rests in its groove. The lanterns burn. The fog drifts. The kelp below sends up its long amber pulse, reaching the tips of the fronds, holding, and then beginning its slow recession, its return to the dimness from which it came. Everything is as it was, everything is as it should be. Your hand rests on the brass corner of the logbook. The brass is smooth and cool. You know its shape without looking, the slight curve of the corner, the small engraved line along the edge, the way it fits the curve of your palm, as if it was made for exactly this, as if all the logbooks that have been held on this gallery over the years have worn their brass corners to exactly this shape, the shape of a hand at rest. You hold it without gripping. You feel its weight without lifting. It is simply there, under your hand, the way the ship is simply there under the water, the way the kelp is simply there on the floor of the sea, the way the fog is simply there in the air, present, patient, requiring nothing. The amber pulse comes again. It is very slow, very full, and it fills the water below the hull from edge to edge of what you can see, a warm gold amber light that makes the sand glow and the kelp fronds stand out in gentle silhouette, and it holds for a long time, a very long time, as if this particular pulse has decided to stay, as if the kelp has found something worth keeping in this warmth and is reluctant to let it go. You watch it through heavy eyes. The amber fills the water. The water is still and clear, and the amber moves through it like warmth moves through a sleeping body, slowly, thoroughly, reaching every part. The fog drifts across your hands. The lanterns glow. The hull settles with a long, low sound. The amber fades very slowly. The kelp waits. You are very still. The stylus rests in its groove. The logbook lies open, its last entry complete, the ink long dry, the page full of the careful work of the night, the temperature readings, the sketches, the quiet sentences that tried to say what it was like to be here, in this light, on this water, watching this beautiful and slowly fading thing. The brass corner of the logbook is smooth under your fingers. The wool blanket is warm. The amber comes again, very slow, very soft. The kelp breathing, the fog, the lanterns, the low creak of the hull. You are here. You are warm. The ship drifts on at the pace of a drifting thought. The sea below is clear and still and lit from within. The fog holds everything close. The logbook is full. There is nothing left to record. There is only the amber light. Slow, full, warm. The stylus rests. Your hand rests. The amber, the fog, the warmth. The kelp breathes. Very slowly now. The amber, slow, warm. The ship holds you. The fog holds the ship. The night holds the fog. Everything is held. The amber, slow, still,